I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Welcome to the show, everybody. We have a special guest today. It is Hannah Webb Howard. Hannah, it's all yours.
Good morning and welcome to Conduit News with Paul Harrell. I'm going to be filling in for Paul today and Tuesday while he's on vacation. But here at Conduit News, you have reached the intersection of conservative ideas and reality, where we are building a liberty machine. So we have a jam-packed show for you today. We're going to start out talking about the student debt crisis, and I hope that I can give you some interesting perspective on that, since I am a millennial with some student debt, and it's a very real reality for me right now and several of my friends. And then we're going to follow that up with our conservative future segment. And then at the top of the second hour, we're going to have Representative Dan Sullivan come on the show to talk about further elaborate on the student debt crisis and how the priorities of students in college have kind of shifted to we want the experience rather than an education. And then we're going to finish off the day with a small business highlight. We're going to speak with Hicks Smith, the founder of Smith's Ready Mix in Nashville, Arkansas. So he's got a cool perspective on small business and what it takes to build a business and then passing it down for generations. So a little bit about me to get started. This is not my first time on Conduit News. To back up and give you some background on this, the very first radio show I ever listened to was Conduit News, and I began listening in college. I actually listened to the podcast version, which I highly recommend that you get if you can't watch the show from 6 to 8. So Paul was the very first talk radio show I ever listened to, and so I never in a million years would have dreamed that I would have been on the show. And he asked me to be of the conservative future while I was in college. And it's kind of snowballed from there. I've been on the show several times since then, and then have been on various other radio shows. And here we are today hosting the show. And so at the heart of Conduit is small business. And I do have interesting perspective on that. My family owns a small business, and of course, when someone owns a small business, it's not just them that owns it, it's their family. So, I've been through the ups, the downs, the good, the bad. And so hopefully I can offer some good insight from the child of a small business owner and what that looks like from a different perspective. So starting out with the student debt crisis, I have some statistics for you that I actually got from Tucker Carlson. The student debt sum has reached $1.5 trillion in America. And this is the highest personal debt of any other debt, second only to home loans. 13 years ago, the average student graduated with $20,000 of debt, and now they graduate with $37,000. Professional schools are no different. And just as a caveat here, I am in law school here at the University of Arkansas at Little Rock. And so the personal student loan debt is very personal to me right now. The average lawyer graduates with $110,000 worth of student debt, and the average doctor graduates with $250,000 of student debt. It's estimated that 2 million people in America owe more than $100,000 in student debt. In 1990, only 25% of students lived with their parents, and now that number's up to 35%. And because of this, the millennial homeowners have dropped 8% than the generation before us, which means that we're getting married later, we're having kids later. It's basically deferring these huge life events for an entire generation worth of people. Half of people with student debts are in deferment. And basically what deferment means is because there is such an exponential amount of student debt out there, there are various, and of course, all these loans are through the government. There's various ways that you can, cut back on the burden of student debts. Sometimes they'll let you defer your payments, which means that you delay your payments for 6 months or, however long you need, 6 months, a year, but all the while you're accruing interest. Or they'll let you lower your payments, or they'll let you do kind of a income-based payment system. But there's 40% of graduates by the year 2023 are expected to be in default on their student loans. But here's the thing about going into default on your student loans. It can never, ever be forgiven through bankruptcy. So most loans, of course, your home loan or whatever, if you file for Chapter 7 bankruptcy, it's essentially a way to get that debt forgiven if you can't pay for it. But the thing with student loans is even if you file for Chapter 7 bankruptcy, your loans never go away. Your debt never goes away. So you can literally never escape it. And because of that, my generation will pay our student loans first, which means we're going to default on our house, we're going to default on our cars, we're not going to pay our lot bills, etc., which all the while explains why people still live with their parents. So I have an interesting background on this topic. So I went to Arkansas State University in undergraduate, spent 4 years there, got a biology degree, and I had a full scholarship. And on top of that, I took out a little bit of student loans, and I'll get into that with you in a minute. But for the first 3 years of my college education, I had a full ride scholarship, which meant that my tuition was paid, my housing was paid, and you get a meal plan, which of course was great. And the reason I don't say that to be, I was so smart, I got a full ride. I even knew about scholarships because my mom was so adamant about, you're going to take the ACT and you're going to take it about 15 times. And of course, to a high school student, that's the most annoying thing in the world. You don't want to take the ACT. The ACT is terrible. It's a 4-hour test, but it's a necessary evil, if you will. But of course, it's what determines what kind of scholarships you get. And my mom, knowing, wiser beyond I was, that scholarships were going to be so important for me because I don't want student loan debt. And so, I took the ACT a million times and landed that scholarship. Now, here's the thing. With my dad being a small business owner, taxes are a big deal to us every year. And it was of the utmost shock to us on April 15th when our accountant called us and informed us that we had now been bumped up to the next tax bracket because I had to count my scholarship as income. And the way that worked was everything over my tuition, so everything, my housing and my meal plans, now had to be counted as income tax for my parents. And so, of course, that translated into that had to be income lumped in with my dad's business. Now, a small business owner that unexpectedly and dramatically gets thrown into the next tax bracket is absolutely devastating. And we've looked back on it over the years, and it would have been, and we believe, we haven't necessarily ran the numbers on it, but we believe it would have been more beneficial for me to have foregone my scholarship just because of the tax penalties we had to pay for that. which is very interesting and something that I think, hopefully we can get that problem solved in Arkansas so that no other poor student has to go through that again, or a poor family in small business. But on top of that, so my senior year of college, I did what we all wanted to do, and I wanted to live with my friends. And I wanted to have that experience with my friends. And so I decided to move off campus where my scholarship did not cover my housing. And so, of course, I accrued some student debt then, which if I could go back and smack myself, I would tell myself not to do that. That's the dumbest thing you have ever done. Live on campus and go to school and live for free. So for any of you college students out there, it's not worth it. Please just live on campus. But here's the thing around student debts. So you don't know what you're doing. So there's no education, and it's out there. The resources are available, but students don't know what they're doing. They don't understand the impact of the amount of money that they're taking out. And so they have this preconceived notion that I'm going to go to college. It's okay that I have student debt because I'm going to be able to pay it back. But that's not necessarily the case. The student tuition has increased approximately 230% since 1980. But wages have only increased 67%. Now, of course, you can do the math there. It doesn't make sense. So we're going into much more debt than what we're able to pay off, or what we make when we get a job to pay off those student loans. And so, of course, we go into all this debt. Being 18 years old, you don't understand what it means to take out a $10,000 loan or a $20,000 loan for a year of school. And then when it's all said and done and it's time to start paying all your other new big kid, quote unquote, bills, you don't have the money to do it. So this has been an interesting situation that me and my husband have dealt with recently, is of course he has a little bit of student loans. And since he's no longer in school, it's time for us to start paying him. It is the second biggest payment we have apart from our house. You pay a car payment worth of student debt, and we don't even have a substantial amount of debt. We have, friends that have 4 or 5 times the amount of debt we do. And so you can only imagine how expensive their payments are. It's an unrealistic number. And so we're going to go to a break right now. But when we come back, we're going to talk about, what are solutions and where do we go from here?
I wanted to remind you that if you miss the daily live broadcast, you can always catch up and listen across our digital platforms on your smartphone or computer. First, you can watch the show on Facebook. Just use your internet browser and type in facebook.com/Conduit News. From there, select videos on the left side of your screen. From there, you can watch the full 2-hour show each day or select specific interviews you want to watch. Another place you can watch the show is on YouTube. Just use your internet browser and type in youtube.com. Then, in the search bar, search for Conduit News. Select the Conduit News page as it appears. While here, be sure to hit the subscribe button and click the little bell to receive notifications when new videos are ready. From YouTube, you can also watch every live show daily and all the interviews I have with guests. More options are available at our website, conduitnews.com. Select Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell tab. From here, you can watch each day's show live or watch old episodes and interviews. You can also catch audio-only versions of the show right here on this page of the website. For audio-only versions of the show, you have some options. For Apple iPhone users, simply use the podcast app and search Conduit News. Subscribe to the podcast and get each hour of the show automatically in your app daily. You can also download the SoundCloud app from your app store and search Conduit News to find our station. Conduit News is the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. And now you know. You've got many options to watch what we do, listen to what we do, and find out what government is doing in your name. Learn more at conduitnews.com. Folks, welcome back to the show. We got a special treat for you. I want to introduce you to Don Dancer. He is a professional debate coach, and he lives right here in Arkansas, lives in Northwest Arkansas. He's been doing this for decades. Don, how are you, sir?
Doing great. Doing great. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, first off, tell me, how does somebody become a debate coach? And, how did you fall into this?
Well, I started in college, and, I sort of was recruited by a professor, and I really didn't want to get involved. However, I needed some money, and he offered me a scholarship, and then that's what got it started. And then I'd never been exposed to debate, which I think is one of the great flaws in our academic system. It's not pushed. And if you look back to history and philosophy, they'll emphasize the fact that if you're going to have a free society, I hate to use the term democracy, but a democratic society, you have to teach debate because individuals have to know how to analyze information because the history behind it is that's why all of this test of logic and reason were put together was because, elites, the intelligentsia, the power brokers of any generation influenced and manipulated people. And so Socrates and Plato and all those guys were trying to teach us how to not be manipulated. And so one of the things I throw out with my classes in the beginning is the allegory of Plato's cave and how we're just sort of viewing projections by other people, and that's not reality. That's the reality they cast upon us.
Yeah.
And so his whole idea is there, and subsequent debate and logicians is that you can't just follow what's projected on you. You become a victim, and so you have to be like what Descartes calls.
Welcome back, everyone. This is Hannah Howard on Conduit News. We've spent the last little bit talking about the student debt crisis and the impact it's having on the millennial generation. So I want to make one thing very clear is don't misunderstand me to say that I don't think my generation should pay back student loans. Absolutely we should. It's a personal responsibility thing. Although we didn't understand what we were doing, it's nonetheless our responsibility to pay these back. It's just interesting all the ways that the government stands in the way and makes this a little bit harder to do. And so, of course, with these staggering numbers and statistics and all the student debt that my generation has, it's no wonder that when people start, Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders throwing out, we're going to forgive all the student debt. It's no wonder our ears perk up, and maybe why so many of us are so, and of course there's so many more factors that go into it, but you can see how this may be a small part of why millennials seem to be embracing socialism so wholeheartedly, if you will. But another interesting thing about paying your student loans back. And so you've got to understand, I've learned a lot about loans in the last year, and I have been a student for 6 years now. And in probably the last 6 months, have I learned more about the loans that I have and student debt in general. So used to, what people would do is they would consolidate their student loans with their home loan. They would refinance their home and lump those two together to get a lower interest rate. So the way interest rates work on student loans are you immediately begin accruing interest when you take out your student loans. An undergraduate, that's right now, as of 2019, that's a 4.5% interest rate. For professional school, it's a 6% interest rate. And then there's a little subsection of loans called plus loans. And those accrue interest at a 7% interest rate. So home loans are much lower than that. And so students or former students would want to consolidate your student loan debts with your house payment. And so, of course, your house payment interest rates you can deduct from your taxes. Well, let me get the name of this bill right. It was the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that changed all this for people. So before the change in the law, if you had a $100,000 mortgage and $20,000 of student loan, you can consolidate that into a mortgage, and then all the interest that accrues on that $120,000 interest, you could write off on your taxes. Now they have separated it out. So if you choose to consolidate that loan, you no longer can write off that portion that is allotted for your student loans. So if you have a $100,000 mortgage, $20,000 student loans, you consolidate them, then you can only write off that interest accrued on the 100% of your mortgage. And on top of that, there's a little extra hurdle they threw in that your loan or whatever system you use to pay back your loan will not track that interest for you. You've got to separate it and keep up with it yourself so that you can file your taxes appropriately and pay back and count that interest on your taxes. And then on top of that, I mean, everyone knows it's just so much harder for my generation to find jobs. You go to school thinking that this degree is magically going to get you not only a job, but a well-paying job. And that's just not the reality. In my own household, there was a couple months that me and my husband were getting very concerned that he had the degree. We did everything we were supposed to do. We applied to jobs every single day and nothing was happening. And the reason being, people wanted 2, 3, 4 years experience. They wanted you to have, various license and accreditation and, so you've got your education, you've got your diploma, but you needed to have all these other pieces of paper saying, oh yeah, I'm qualified to do X, Y, and Z. So now I'm qualified to be hired. But how are you supposed to ever get license X, Y, and Z if no one takes a chance on a young person and hires them? And so it's just an interesting dynamic surrounding the whole situation. So we've got students who don't know what they're doing, taking out tens of thousands of dollars in loans. And then you go to school, you have the best time, you hang out, you get a degree, you make new friends, and then it's time to graduate and you're slapped with huge debt payments. You can't find a job. And ultimately, you're faced with, okay, I'm either going to pay a car payment worth of student loans, or we're going to have to explore one of these options for let's defer our payments, let's lower them. But of course, all the while your interest accrues. And so it's the new credit card. It's the new trap for our generation. And so we'll see how that turns out for us. But reportedly, and this is coming from Business Insider and Fox News, a lot of students cite their student loans when they wait to start families, they wait to get married, they wait to have kids. And there was a recent study by Business Insider that said 13% of millennials now say that they don't want to have children. And they directly say that that's because they're in so much debt that they no longer want to add a child to that mix and add to that burden. So we're going to go to break. When we come back, we're going to be talking with our conservative future. His name's Andrew Hinton. He's a Liberty University graduate, and he's got some really interesting insight of conservative values all over the country. So we'll be right back.
Hi, folks. I'd like to tell you about Conduit for Commerce. Conduit for Commerce is an Arkansas-focused nonprofit organization which receives no government funding. Its core beliefs are economic freedom, individual liberty, and limited government. Conduit for Commerce believes those principles are foundational to all individual freedoms and promotes these principles by educating Arkansans and your elected state officials concerning good government policies that will create a better life for all Arkansans. These traditional conservative values have proven throughout history to lift people from poverty, achieve individual desire, and assist in the pursuit of happiness. Conduit for Commerce operates on the basic belief that these principles and ideals of the American founding are worth conserving and renewing at each generation, especially today. Conduit for Commerce accomplishes this work only through the support and interaction of small businesses as well as individuals. Conduit for Commerce thrives from like-minded Arkansans' participation and partnership. It's only through the support of folks like you that Conduit for Commerce is able to be the conduit to the Arkansas State Capitol. Help us continue as Arkansas's primary small business policy entrepreneur through your financial support. Join us by visiting conduitforcommerce.org. Once you're at the site, click Support Our Cause at the top of your screen. Your one-time or monthly donation will directly impact Conduit for Commerce's mission to promote liberty and economic freedom in Arkansas. Together, we can build a liberty machine. That's conduitforcommerce.org.
I think, therefore I am. You have to know how to think. And we don't teach kids how to think anymore.
So
I got involved in it in college, and then I fell in love with it because it challenged me to think like nothing else before, and it taught me how to, analyze information in a way that nobody had ever explained to me.
We're talking with Don Dancer, a professional debate coach. That's fascinating. I want to. There's so much to unpack there in the statement that you just made.
Yeah.
First of all, when it comes to Plato's cave, sometimes it can be hard to when you try to go back to the other, the people that are still in bondage and be like, hey, there's a whole other world. Sometimes they just don't even want to listen. They don't want to be free sometimes. And also address that, but also address this, Don, the fact that you said I hate to say the word or use the word democracy. Why is that?
Well, I think that term, as with a lot of terms now, has been sort of tainted. And so, there are multiple definitions of the term as people understand it. It's not universally understood as being the same thing. For example, a Marxist would see democracy as a socialist society. And that's
Welcome back to the show, ladies and gentlemen. We have with us right now our conservative future, all the way from South Carolina, Mr. Andrew Hinton.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for having me.
So just to preface this whole conversation, me and Andrew are actually cousins. But the funny thing about it is, most people would play the devil's advocate to that and say, well, of course he's conservative. They're related. It runs in the family. But me and Andrew actually didn't meet until we were in college. And I think our very first conversation ever was about Trump. So, we knew we got along just fine when we started talking about Trump at Thanksgiving. So Andrew is originally from New Hampshire. So he is from the northeast part of the country. So Andrew, tell us why you're a conservative, how this happened.
How this happened. I was born in Massachusetts, but I was raised in New Hampshire. All of my childhood and all my memories of the Northeast are basically centered on New Hampshire. And a lot of people don't know that New Hampshire is a swing state. So we have a lot of presidential candidates that will come through and visit us. It is a highly political state.
So that's interesting because Arkansas, at this point, we used to be a Democrat state. But now, we're hardcore red. So rarely do we get politicians that think we're even worth their time. So that's interesting that you say that.
Well, yeah, the paradox for us is we're such a small state. I think we have a little bit over 1 million people, and we get so much political coverage when it comes to these elections. Like coming up here, we're going to have tons of presidential candidates for the Democrats coming over and trying to win us over. I think we have Warren trying to woo us the most right now. But growing up in New Hampshire, the high school that I went to was very college prep focused, but it was also extremely liberal leaning. The professor, they aren't professors, but they had us calling them by their first names. There was no school bell. It was very college-esque, if you will. But all of the teachers there were very liberal in their mindset, and it was it was definitely hard growing up there because all of them were just trying to teach you their worldview and to have you think like them. There was no let me teach you how to think, is let me teach you what to think. And whenever they would host a debate or a kind of like a forum in their class, it would be, okay, I let you talk, but your viewpoint is wrong, and here's why you need to accept mine. So I would definitely say, I've been to the South, so I understand that the South is much more conservative. It's a completely different culture than the Northeast. The Northeast, you have to understand that a lot of the people that you would see as liberal, even to the point of maybe embracing socialism and communism right now, have been taught to think that. And they don't really get the chance to ask themselves why. Me being who I was going through high school, I was very stubborn. I get that from my family. Not the side that you and I share, however, the other side, from Kentucky. But I was very stubborn, and my family was definitely there saying, why are they teaching you this, and why are you taking what they say at face value without questioning it? And that's something that stuck with me ever since then. No matter what a teacher or professor tells me is the right answer, I'm going to have to go back and check it myself. So definitely fact-checking is one of the reasons why I consider myself a level-headed conservative coming out of there. I'm not crazy radical. They would call me crazy radical for believing in freedom of speech and such. They have this concept of ultimate utopia coming to earth through their liberal, progressive ideals. And I was always there to remind them that human beings are flawed, fallible, and will find ways to break the rules and take advantage of each other, which I find most Northeast liberals do not like to talk about.
See, so that's funny that you say it was your, refusal to groupthink that brought you to conservatism, because one thing that I'm really passionate about is conservatism is just the truth. And most people who seek the truth eventually land on conservatism. So were you able to be open about your political beliefs, or did you just kind of keep them to yourself? Did you not talk about them, or were you a devil's advocate to them?
I generally, by nature, try to be devil's advocate. But growing up where I did and when I did in New Hampshire, in the environment that I did, there wasn't really anyone else advocating for the conservative side. I mean, to give you an idea of how it kind of happened, and this really was formative on me. I didn't think it would be at the time, but it ended up becoming very formative. The very first day of ninth grade, because the way that we move through our school system is you first through sixth, then you go into middle school from 7th to 8th, and then from 8th you go into the high school. So your very first day of ninth grade, where you've been mixed in with a whole bunch of other people from 8th grade that you weren't previously associated with, we sat down in our teams, and there were about 3 teams of about, I want to say it was a little bit over 30 people per team. You sat down with them in a large auditorium, and they have on one side of the wall agree, on the other side of the wall disagree, and they would say something to the effect of, do you believe that X is constitutional, right, and moral? And X could be any topic at all. It could be anything ranging from being fiscally responsible to abortion to whatever have you. And they would say, do you agree or disagree? So then people would move from the center to whatever side they fell on, agree or disagree. And I thought that was going to be the end of it at the time. But then they said, okay, we're now going to open the floor to debate. And the teachers would then question you or allow your peers to question you on why you held that view. And then they would allow you to move. So I found myself on every single issue, a social conservative and a fiscal conservative. And it was about 50-50 in the beginning, 15 on one side, 15 on the other. But then the accusatory tone and the questioning, like leading people on, drew people away from the conservative side over to the progressive side. And just by nature, I thought, okay, no one here can play devil's advocate. They've removed that from the table. I can't fall into that natural spot I like to occupy. I have to be that almost dissenting voice every single time. So whenever any topic got brought up and they all came to a consensus, yes, this is what we think and what we agree, I would be that voice countering it because it was firmly what I believe, but also because I'm like, you guys need to understand there are people out there that disagree with you on this on a rational, logical basis. And it's not a strict emotional appeal like there seems to be sometime. And you need to sit down and be able to reason with me. You can't have this almost allergic reaction to my ideas and my beliefs and just shun me. You have to confront me. You have to deal with me. That's part of life. If that answers your question.
Absolutely. So one thing that I have come to find through my years, in college and because, college was a new world for me. College was the first time that I was the minority in my beliefs. But it made me a stronger conservative because it made me think. And so it sounds like that was kind of your experience starting well before it even started for me, that you were challenged. And so you had to even further seek the truth, which solidified your beliefs.
I would absolutely agree with that, yes.
So you went to Liberty University, which is probably incredible. It's incredible for me, and so I know our viewers are going to think that's incredible. So tell me about your time there and your experience at Liberty, and was it different from high school since they're generally a more conservative school?
Yes. So part of the reason why I chose Liberty is I literally told myself, you've dealt with 4 years of craziness and people who firmly disagree with you and have done their best to pull you over to their side, propagandize you. Why not go to a conservative school where you can at least relax and see what I wouldn't say mainstream conservative ideas are, but at least a conservative university that is preaching these conservative values. So I headed off to Liberty University, and I was not disappointed. The faculty there, the ability to be mentored by them and have them teach you truly conservative values, I would say, I am biased because I went there, I would say it was unparalleled. I started out as a government major before I switched over into science. So I got exposure to a lot of brilliant government professors that had been in either law, like politics and policy, or had been studying abroad at embassies and such. And they brought back this really, I would almost say, seasoned or mature appreciation of what America is in comparison to the rest of the world. And that's not something I saw in high school. I didn't have this cadre of teachers around me in high school that had gone abroad and come back and seen the world for what it was and then see America as the shining beacon on a hill. I had a whole bunch of teachers that had only been in America and complained about how it could be better. Having these teachers at Liberty, they were like, oh no, we've been abroad and America is this beacon on a hill, and here is why. It wouldn't just be the law and the government studies, but it'd be their own experience as well. And they brought that to the table, and that ignited a passion in me to not only appreciate America more and dig in and study it more, but it also definitely made my beliefs and my values, any sort of questions I had on being a conservative, were eliminated after that first year. I was like, yes, I'm well-reasoned, I'm not alone, and their experiences definitely meet and match my beliefs and understanding of the world. And that was a really good period of mentorship that I wouldn't have traded for anything.
So that's really interesting because I was also a science major in college. And every single one of my professors would comment on Trump and obviously very liberal. I did not have one single professor not lecture on him, totally out of their purview of the class. I mean, we'd be talking about microbiology, and then that professor was comparing Trump to Stalin. I kid you not. That's a comparison they made. And so it's interesting how starkly different, me and my conservative state than you, in a more liberal atmosphere, which of course you're a little bit sheltered at Liberty. But Liberty had a whole different take on the Trump situation.
Yes.
So y'all have had multiple encounters with Trump. So tell me about those.
So for those who don't know, Liberty was not only, from the get-go, they actually weren't in Trump's corner. It developed into that sort of relationship, from my opinion, maybe halfway through that whole primary season. But initially, it was Ted Cruz that came, and he was the first one to announce his presidential run. So a lot of people think that maybe Liberty had it out to support Trump from the beginning. I don't think they made up their mind until later to really, back him. He had visited several times. He had visited, I think it was my sophomore year, where he had came, and he had tried to reach out to us, knowing that we're an evangelical college. He decided he was going to go through the Bible and find a verse that really he thought would speak to us. So a lot of people that read the Bible know, for example, that there's 1st and 2nd Kings. Apparently, Trump did not at the time know it was supposed to be 1st and 2nd Kings. So reading with his signature finger up in the air, off the teleprompter, or his notes, rather, he said, "My favorite verse is 2 Kings, 2nd," and then he tried to reach out, and we started laughing. I mean, we appreciated that he had tried to talk to us and what he perceived was our language, but it was still one of those signature moments where we're like, oh, he tried. He really reached out and tried to get a hold of us on our level. But even when he was there before he ran, there's an energy about him that is very different than other candidates that we had who came there. I mean, we even had Bernie come, and that was just uncomfortable. That was like an hour of uncomfortableness. Nobody clapped. Nobody cheered. He just pushed his agenda. We sat there quietly and listened. Trump brought an energy where he knows how to engage with people on a personal level, almost from wherever he's at. He knows how to see what's important to the crowd and see how they're reacting and really touch and go on that. So he has his platform, but he will really dial in on what he can sense is important to them. So anyway, about halfway through the primary season, it became more apparent that we were going to, as a university, as a university, we were still going to vote for who we're going to vote for. There was no pressure, you should vote for this candidate or that candidate. But people had generally made up their minds by that point who they supported. I think he came for commencement and delivered an amazing commencement speech that really, kind of choked me up. When he sits down, he has those patriotic speeches. I can't help but think of like Ronald Reagan with some of his speeches. So yeah, I think the last time he visited was his commencement speech, and since then, of course, he's been being the president of the United States. But he had that relationship with us. I think he's even rumored to have helped build some of the dormitories and other newer buildings going up around Liberty University, because of course Liberty is in this huge expansion project right now. He said at the convocation that he was helping design the architecture. I don't know if that's true or not.
So what's cool that you say that, if conservative ideas were dying, a school like Liberty wouldn't be growing. So I think that's kind of a testament to, we may be silent, but we're not as much of a minority as they think we are. Another profound thing that you said was you sat quietly and listened to what Bernie Sanders had to say when conservative commentators did not have that same courtesy at different, I think it was Berkeley, that what was it, Ben Shapiro ran out.
Yes. That has bugged me for a while, because I used to think, maybe it's not true that there's this big divide in courtesy that you extend to people that you bring to the universities. But I think it was after UC Berkeley, after that event, I was kind of flabbergasted that happened at all, that opportunity was even allowed to present itself. But yeah, I would definitely agree. we invited, we being Liberty invited Hillary, they invited Bernie, they invited anybody from the Democratic side that wanted to come. And I think Bernie was the only one that took them up. And to really speak to the credit of Liberty, we sat there and we said, okay, we're willing to listen to your ideas, but we disagree with you, but we can be respectful. And I don't want to point the finger or group everyone on the other side into one giant pot, but I really do see, and I think the nation sees, that there's this almost allergic reaction to conservative ideals from those people. They almost can't handle the idea of us having different ideas and having a logical belief system. I think it was, I can't remember if it was Marcus Aurelius or not. No, it was Aristotle, I think. Aristotle said that the hallmark of a high mind is the ability to entertain an idea without accepting it. And that is what they can't do. They cannot entertain the idea that conservative ideas, conservative values, conservative belief systems, if you will, are valid, moral, and ethical. They almost have this allergic reaction, a violent emotional reaction to those ideas. And, I mean, if you look at history, there's an issue when that happens. You can't have a democracy or a republic when certain parts of the population refuse to tolerate the ideas and beliefs of others. Democracy and the republic, representative republic in which we live in, they require that we are able to come together, sit down at the same table, come to a consensus on what we agree about, and move in that direction. And it just seems like ever since, I'd say, the late 90s, we're seeing this increased polarization of people moving further to the left and further to the right and refusing to sit down and have those conversations. And the closer we get to a deadlock, the more I'm concerned that one element of the left or one element of the right will really make that push to overwhelm the other. And right now, I don't see that coming from the right. As much as the news puts it out there that they're concerned about whatever issues are going on, I really see that coming from a populist movement of the left that is violently intolerant towards not only free speech, but the exchange of ideas and discourse. They're not even willing to sit down and have a debate, which is what I find concerning, because you have to be able to have that exchange of ideas for our republic to work.
I absolutely agree with you. And I think that is incredibly insightful for you and refreshing because, you know, we toe the line between, are we millennials? Are we Gen Z? No one really knows. But we get we get a bad rap. You know, everyone just groups us together as the socialist, lazy young people. And so I think everything that you have said today has been a nice refresher and reminder that there are those of us out there that, you know, don't group think, and we do think for ourselves, and we do have, you know, independent, sophisticated thoughts, and that there is hope for the future, even if the mainstream media, you know, wants to convince you otherwise. So Andrew, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show today. I hope you have the best Labor Day weekend, and I hope to get to talk to you soon.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been my pleasure.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we will be right back after this break.
I wanted to remind you that if you miss the daily live broadcast, you can always catch up and listen across our digital platforms on your smartphone or computer. First, you can watch the show on Facebook. Just use your internet browser and type in facebook.com/Conduit News. From there, select videos on the left side of your screen. From there, you can watch the full 2-hour show each day or select specific interviews you want to watch. Another place you can watch the show is on YouTube. Just use your internet browser and type in youtube.com. Then, in the search bar, search for Conduit News. Select the Conduit News page as it appears. While here, be sure to hit the subscribe button and click the little bell to receive notifications when new videos are ready. From YouTube, you can also watch every live show daily and all the interviews I have with guests. More options are available at our website, conduitnews.com. Select Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell tab. From here, you can watch each day's show live or watch old episodes and interviews. You can also catch audio-only versions of the show right here on this page of the website. For audio-only versions of the show, you have some options. For Apple iPhone users, simply use the podcast app and search Conduit News. Subscribe to the podcast and get each hour of the show automatically in your app daily. You can also download the SoundCloud app from your app store and search Conduit News to find our station. Conduit News is the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. And now you know. You've got many options to watch what we do, listen to what we do, and find out what government is doing in your name. Learn more at conduitnews.com.
A collectivist society, and individual liberty and collectivism is a contradiction. I mean, the whole idea there is everybody has to be on board. And so that becomes the power mechanism. And so if you try to get out of the cave, then, then you're the loony, or the person fighting the system, and you have to be dealt with, And so debate, if it is anything, it's fighting against collectivism, collectivist ideas, and, we would preach that most of the atrocities that have been linked to various other times throughout human history are actually from collectivism. Like Don Denser as an individual can only affect a few people if he goes crazy. But Adolf Hitler with a collective identity, a collective
Welcome
state.
back, ladies and gentlemen. This is Conduit News with Paul Harrell, Hannah Howard guest hosting. We've had a packed first hour. Talking about the student loan debt and then that awesome conservative future from Andrew Hinton. Coming up the next hour, we're going to have Dan Sullivan on the show, going to give us some more insight into the student debt crisis and what more colleges could be doing and, situations that have led up to this issue. And then at the 7:30 hour, we're going to have our small business highlight with Mr. Hicks Smith. And we're going to talk with him about, what it took for him to build his business and obstacles he had to overcome along the way and maybe how the government interfered with that or could have made it better. And then his new transition into retirement and how his family is going to take over for him and some of his hobbies that he's enjoying while he is in retirement. And so again, this is Johnny Cash Friday, which I tell you is interesting because, and this may be a generational thing and maybe I'm just uncultured, but Conduit News was, not that I'd never heard Johnny Cash, but I have listened to more Johnny Cash on Conduit News than I promise you I ever would have otherwise. I mean, probably more than I ever will. So I guess we could say that's bringing the generations together, culturing me with some Johnny Cash music. So maybe I have failed the Arkansas people by not knowing who Johnny Cash is, but it's been interesting, and I could probably sing along at this point. So what a treat it is to kick off my Conduit News hosting with Johnny Cash Friday. So again, stay tuned for the next hour. We've got some huge guests coming up. It's going to be a great time. They're going to offer us some awesome insight. And then coming back, I'll be back next Tuesday, and we've got some big guests coming on then. We're going to sit down with Senator Bozeman to talk about his ag tour, and we're going to have some more guests come on with us then, and it's going to be a great time, and we're just going to continue with the fun. So join us back next hour.
Broadcasting from the Baker Implement Studios. Baker Implement, serving you with 11 convenient locations. This is News Talk 101.3 FM and 12:30 AM KBTM Jonesboro.
Hi, folks. I'd like to tell you about Conduit for Commerce. Conduit for Commerce is an Arkansas-focused nonprofit organization which receives no government funding. Its core beliefs are economic freedom, individual liberty, and limited government. Conduit for Commerce believes those principles are foundational to all individual freedoms and promotes these principles by educating Arkansans and your elected state officials concerning good government policies that will create a better life for all Arkansans. These traditional conservative values have proven throughout history to lift people from poverty, achieve individual desire, and assist in the pursuit of happiness. Conduit for Commerce operates on the basic belief that these principles and ideals of the American founding are worth conserving and renewing at each generation, especially today. Conduit for Commerce accomplishes this work only through the support and interaction of small businesses as well as individuals. Conduit for Commerce thrives from like-minded Arkansans' participation and partnership. It's only through the support of folks like you that Conduit for Commerce is able to be the conduit to the Arkansas state capitol. Help us continue as Arkansas's primary small business policy entrepreneur through your financial support. Join us by visiting conduitforcommerce.org. Once you're at the site, click Support Our Cause at the top of your screen. Your one-time or monthly donation will directly impact Conduit for Commerce's mission to promote liberty and economic freedom in Arkansas. Together, we can build a liberty machine. That's conduitforcommerce.org.
Massacre millions.
Yeah.
You know.
That's a really good point.
Yeah. Getting out of the cave, I think, is so hard now. It's interesting that allegory was 2,400 years ago, but I think it's more relevant now than ever because of the power of the information apparatus. You know, you've got the phones and in people's faces constantly, social media, the news media, the movies, the music, everything is propagandized. And so, you know, when you have everybody saying the same thing, it's really hard for someone to say, hey, wait a minute. This is kind of a contradiction, guys. I mean, you know, we've got, for example, people blowing up about, you know, Trump and sexism, but we live in a country saturated with pornography.
Yeah.
And feminists never say anything about that.
Mm-hmm.
Which is the most, like, repugnant thing that a woman can endure, I would think. And yet, have you ever seen a feminist protest pornography? Not once in my lifetime.
Yeah, not that I can remember. Matter of fact, I can't remember who, but somebody wrote a piece about Hollywood and entertainment in general, and said that it's kind of ironic that they're so outraged that the rest of the country isn't outraged at, you know, when the president tweets that or when the president says that. And he says the reason is because Hollywood has done everything they can to push the envelope further, you know, to contribute to a moral decline. And, you know, this guy was just kind of remarking how ironic it is that they're now outraged, that we're not outraged, you know?
But see, as a debater, everything like that happens for a reason. I mean, it's not like that's a small entity. It's a huge part of society that's controlled. And so why is that? I mean, you know, were they trying to deconstruct discipline created by, you know, prior generations and deconstruct the family and now reconstruct a collectivist idea or a Marxist idea on a society because that wouldn't work in the beginning? I mean, you know, and so the contradiction with feminism, you know, that's a heck of a contradiction. I mean, these guys are marching with Islamists, and and saying they advocate for, protection of women. And so that's a contradiction. You have to look back and go, all right, so let's analyze. What's going on here?
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Welcome back to the show, ladies and gentlemen. This is Conduit News with Paul Harrell. This is Hannah Howard guest hosting for Paul while he's on vacation. We have on the line with us Representative Dan Sullivan. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Hannah. Glad to be here.
So, Dan, we've been spending this first hour talking about the student debt crisis and how that's impacting especially my generation. And so what kind of insight do you have to give into this issue?
Well, just completely agree. The students and our quest for a higher education, people are willing to go out on a limb and sacrifice a lot of their future by taking out student loans that they're unable to repay. I think it has a lot to do with what our colleges are marketing. I've seen several recent articles in various papers around the state that we are no longer, or not necessarily, marketing education as the reason young people should go to college. One of the things that they're marketing is the quality of life and a lifestyle, college experience. So apparently our universities are starting to market people to come to college just for the fact that they need to have that, quote, college experience. And they are taking out loans and investing their money in a quality of life issue. And that really concerns me that we are now losing our focus on the value of a college education and strictly the educational part of that.
Well, so absolutely. So in my research on all the student loan debt and, what brought us to this crisis point that we're at, colleges and universities are the biggest lobby present with continuing this type of practice, if you will, and maybe why, the legislator, federally or state, haven't addressed the issue.
Well, frame that again for me. So, when you talk about colleges and universities lobbying, I don't know that I would necessarily call it lobbying. I think it's a lot of marketing. They spend a lot of their money and time and energy trying to get students to come and stay at the universities. I know the retention rate of our universities is starting to go down. In other words, we are able to attract them, and we attract them with scholarships, with money from other avenues that we use to entice students to come. And then once they come, we have a hard time retaining them. But the lure of the marketing dollar is very, very strong. I'm the chair of the House Education Committee on Higher Education. And I've met several times with our higher ed folks, or the lobbyists or the marketers there. We were paying our lobbyists, our college lobbyists, with taxpayer dollars. And I met with our lobbyists at the different universities, and they have changed that now, where we are no longer using taxpayer dollars to pay for the lobbyists for our universities. Now, they call them by something different. They call them liaisons and give them a different title. but effectively they're lobbyists. And we should not be using taxpayer dollars to pay for those lobbyists. But again, to go back to my point, I think it's just really huge marketing that our universities use that has caused the college lifestyle and the college campus atmosphere for our students to think they can go into debt. And it's necessary for them to go into debt to have the, quote, college experience. And then they come out with a degree that doesn't necessarily pay them enough to pay back the student loans that they've taken out for that degree. Does that kind of fit along with your experience in college?
Oh, absolutely. So to give you a little context in my background, so I went to college for an education. You know, I come from a very definition of a middle-class family, and I knew that I wanted to do something that required a professional degree. So college was absolutely necessary for me. And so I was there for an education. But while I was there, you know, I wasn't going to miss out on experiences. So I guess you could kind of lump me into that category. But, you know, of course, me and my husband both, we were involved in Greek life. And, you know, we'll both tell you that was an incredibly rewarding experience. And we wouldn't trade it for the world. But it was a byproduct of us being there for our education. You know, we both had to go to school to get an education, and we just got involved while we were there. But several of our friends, you know, for whatever reason, maybe they had family businesses, etc., you know, this, that, and the other. And some of them even came to college and then went to trade school to do something else. They came strictly for the 4-year experience, you know, because that's what your parents did. Your parents, you know, rushed XYZ sorority, fraternity, and they had the best time of their life. And so they wanted their kids to have that too. And that's awesome because you make good networking connections, but it's essentially, you know, not beneficial if you're not going to use it for your education.
Well, you know, I think I agree with you. Hear what you're saying. The education is the primary reason you go to school. And there are other, as you said, byproducts of that, the networking, the other opportunities that open up to you, broaden your horizon. All of those things are critically important to one professionally as they develop throughout their years. You know, that's one of the problems our universities are having right now is that they've overpriced their product. You know, I think in previous generations, the product was education with a byproduct of the college life and college experience. But now the universities are charging so much for their that experience and for the education that students just can't afford it anymore. You know, now when you go to universities, the fees are tacked on. All the other things besides education have almost outpriced them. And I think students think and parents and those that take advantage of that, the opportunities that are afforded you to college, a college education are still there. But the expenses that are tacked on are tending not to be worth it. So a lot of students now are going to online education. They can get the value of the educational component without all of the fees and other extras that go along with that. They may even live in a college community and take online courses. So I think that's a big part of what the escalating costs have been at a university, that people just can't, your return on your investment, ROI, return on investment, just is not as good as it once used to be. What do you think about that?
Well, absolutely. So you made a good point that kids are going to online to avoid paying fees because, of course, you know, it's been passed in Arkansas, or they capped tuition, but of course they didn't cap fees. So, you know, where tuition doesn't raise, fees raise. And that happened while I was in college. But
and
so
that was a little sneaky, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, for
tuition, but let the fees increase. So guess what universities did?
They increased fees.
Yeah, and guess what happened this year? When the governor asked colleges to hold tight on tuition, they did for a year or two, but as soon as that request left, they upped that tuition and the fees.
I mean, absolutely.
The cost of education continues to escalate, and people just are having to make a decision. is it worth it? Again, you just eventually you price yourself out of a product that people have value to.
Well, and so here's another thing. Colleges are historically, currently, however you want to phrase it, indoctrination schools. So not only are we paying for this overpriced education, but we're paying to be indoctrinated by, some one-sided professors who want to, rather than encourage free thinking, they want to encourage you to think like they do.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you hear this all the time. If you, and this is where I have a hard problem with, a big problem with universities overselling their campus life versus their education. If you're going to go pay for a campus life, I, as a taxpayer, am not willing to subsidize your campus life on a liberal university. And of course, Arkansas State is a pretty good example. You were among those who fought hard at Arkansas State University to get rid of free speech zones. And eventually we had a bill that we passed, and I was fortunate to be one of the sponsors of that got rid of those free speech zones. But that attitude is very typical on our university campuses, even in a state that is so-called a conservative state like Arkansas. So why would we as taxpayers choose to fund a lifestyle, a college experience that subsidizes that liberal college experience? And I don't think legislators and taxpayers are very willing to go on and forward with that. And I'll tie into this, Hannah. You hear a lot of this talk now. Two very prominent phrases are quality of life. We want our communities to have quality of life issues. And it sounds real good. It's a real good phrase, but what does that mean? And now you're hearing that tied into college funding. We want our college students to have a really good quality of life. And that's starting to take a little precedent over a quality education. The other phrase that you hear a lot of now is we want to have public-private partnerships. And again, that sounds really good. But what does that mean? Does that mean our universities are now going to partner with private entities, and the private entities can now benefit greatly financially from using public money? I hope your listeners will start to be really attuned to those quality of life phrases and those public-private partnership phrases, because essentially they're after the public dollar. That's the bottom line. And we really need to be careful when we start really applauding these efforts at a public-private partnership, because you have the government, again, deciding where your money is going to go. It ends up in increased taxes. We're seeing that in Jonesboro right now.
Well, that was going to be my point. Quality of life has been a big phrase in your district coming up. But I think you make a good point that these are taxpayer-funded issues. And so what people may not understand is the student loans that you take out, when you're 18, 19 years old, they're all federally subsidized. I mean, they're taxpayer dollars. Of course you can, call Wells Fargo, apply for a loan there, but kids don't have any credit. And so the way that you borrow a loan when you're 18, 19 from the government, it doesn't depend on your credit. It doesn't depend on, you've got a great history of paying back your loans. They don't know anything about you. And all that burden is now put on the taxpayers.
Yeah, and that's another example of a public-private partnership. I mean, the government is essentially loaning out the money, and they're, of course, they have their network of banks and access to money. But that's another good example of using the public's money to fund college students into debt. And going into debt is never a good idea and should be avoided at all costs. But it's so easy and so enticing. And we're in an environment now of give me what I want right now. I don't want to wait. I want it now. Give it to me. I'm willing to go into debt. I'm willing to take other people's money from them. When we go into these public-private partnerships, and our universities are trending that way. But and using the taxpayer dollar to do that, we're essentially saying we want to take other people's money so that college students can have what they want right now, and we'll go into debt to do it.
Absolutely.
It's really a bad idea. In the long run, it just doesn't prove to be worthy.
Absolutely. And so, quality of life, my definition, even as a millennial for quality of life is I want to be out of debt. I want no debt, and I want to accumulate wealth so that I can do these things I want. But student loan debt stops you from the beginning. So the minute you graduate college, it's all about climbing yourself out of that hole to even just break even so that you can essentially start living your life. So it's an interesting argument that they call it quality of life when really in the long run it's hindering your quality of life.
Listen, I tell you what, I couldn't have said it better, and I'm going to borrow that statement. When you talk about quality of life, one of the most important qualities in life is staying out of debt. Boy, amen to that. And I hope our young people and people that are considering going into debt start to combine that thought and bring that together. Quality of life means paying your way as you go. Quality of life means being able to have the patience to earn what you get. Quality of life means having a strong foundation educationally that will take you forward in your life. And unfortunately, quality of life is becoming, give it to me right now. It's so important that I have it right now. I'll go into debt or I'll take your money. In Northeast Arkansas right now, where, again, I know the audience is from all over our state, but all of our communities are going to be going into these issues and facing these. This community has a pool. Our community can't compete because they have a pool, so we're going to raise our taxes and we're going to build a pool or a university, or we're going to build university facilities. So that just creates that competitive model that now the other communities are going to have to raise their taxes. And we get into this spiral of raising taxes to improve our, quote, quality of life, where we just continually go into debt rather than take a long-term perspective of let's pay as we go, give people freedom to spend their money as they choose, and let that drive what our community looks like. And that's getting more and more difficult to do.
Absolutely. Well, Representative Sullivan, this has been incredibly insightful, and I thank you so much for coming on the show with me today on Johnny Cash Friday. So we'll talk with you soon.
Great. I thank you, Hannah. Have a good day.
You too. We'll be right back after this break.
Massacre million.
Yeah. That's a real. I wanted to remind you that if you miss the daily live broadcast, you can always catch up and listen across our digital platforms on your smartphone or computer. First, you can watch the show on Facebook. Just use your internet browser and type in facebook.com/Conduit News. From there, select videos on the left side of your screen. From there, you can watch the full 2-hour show each day or select specific interviews you want to watch. Another place you can watch the show is on YouTube. Just use your internet browser and type in youtube.com. Then, in the search bar, search for Conduit News. Select the Conduit News page as it appears. While here, be sure to hit the subscribe button and click the little bell to receive notifications when new videos are ready. From YouTube, you can also watch every live show daily and all the interviews I have with guests. More options are available at our website, conduitnews.com. Select Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell tab. From here, you can watch each day's show live or watch old episodes and interviews. You can also catch audio-only versions of the show right here on this page of the website. For audio-only versions of the show, you have some options. For Apple iPhone users, simply use the podcast app and search Conduit News. Subscribe to the podcast and get each hour of the show automatically in your app daily. You can also download the SoundCloud app from your app store and search Conduit News to find our station. Conduit News is the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. And now you know. You've got many options to watch what we do, listen to what we do, and find out what government is doing in your name. Learn more at conduitnews.com.
Massacre millions.
Yeah.
You know.
That's a really good point.
Yeah. Getting out of the cave, I think, is so hard now. It's interesting that allegory was 2,400 years ago, but I think it's more relevant now than ever because of the power of the information apparatus. You know, you've got the phones and in people's faces constantly, social media, the news media, the movies, the music, everything is propagandized. And so, you know, when you have everybody saying the same thing, it's really hard for someone to say, hey, wait a minute. This is kind of a contradiction, guys. I mean, you know, we've got, for example, people blowing up about, you know, Trump and sexism, but we live in a country saturated with pornography.
Yeah.
And feminists never say anything about that.
Mm-hmm.
Which is the most, like, repugnant thing that a woman can endure, I would think. And yet, have you ever seen a feminist protest pornography? Not once in my lifetime.
Yeah, not that I can remember. Matter of fact, I can't remember who, but somebody wrote a piece about.
Welcome back to the show, ladies and gentlemen. This is Hannah Howard filling in for Paul Harrell on Conduit News. We just spoke with Dan Sullivan about the student debt crisis and how students are paying for the experience these days and not the education. And to his point, I've got an interesting article here, and it's called "It's Not Your Dad's Dormitory," and it's a newspaper article about University of Arkansas's new dorm, which includes recording studios, pianos. It says a workshop with 3-dimensional printers, laser cutters, sewing machines, and soldering irons. Now, I don't even know what a soldering iron is, but I think that this article itself proves what Dan just talked about. They're selling the experience. And in this case, they're selling the amenities of the dorm. And of course, that's going to be translated back to the students. So anyway, so we've spent this show today talking about the student debt crisis, and we had an awesome conservative future. And then we've just spoken with Mr. Dan Sullivan about students paying for the experience rather than the education, and maybe how we fix that and what things need to change to keep my generation from going down this spiraling tunnel. And then coming up on the last 30-minute segment, we have Mr. Hicks Smith with Smith's Ready Mix, a small business highlight, and he's from Nashville, Arkansas, who has spent many, many years building his successful business. And maybe he can offer us some really cool insight into maybe how my generation can, you know, build small businesses and maybe choose that path instead of spending all of our money for the rest of our lives paying back our student loans. So we're really excited to have him on, and we're going to continue on it with Johnny Cash Friday, and we're going to have a great rest of the show. So we'll be right back.
Hi, folks. I'd like to tell you about Conduit for Commerce. Conduit for Commerce is an Arkansas-focused nonprofit organization which receives no government funding. Its core beliefs are economic freedom, individual liberty, and limited government. Conduit for Commerce believes those principles are foundational to all individual freedoms and promotes these principles by educating Arkansans and your elected state officials concerning good government policies that will create a better life for all Arkansans. These traditional conservative values have proven throughout history to lift people from poverty, achieve individual desire, and assist in the pursuit of happiness. Conduit for Commerce operates on the basic belief that these principles and ideals of the American founding are worth conserving and renewing at each generation, especially today. Conduit for Commerce accomplishes this work only through the support and interaction of small businesses as well as individuals. Conduit for Commerce thrives from like-minded Arkansans' participation and partnership. It's only through the support of folks like you that Conduit for Commerce is able to be the conduit to the Arkansas State Capitol. Help us continue as Arkansas's primary small business policy entrepreneur through your financial support. Join us by visiting conduitforcommerce.org. Once you're at the site, click Support Our Cause at the top of your screen. Your one-time or monthly donation will directly impact Conduit for Commerce's mission to promote liberty and economic freedom in Arkansas. Together, we can build a liberty machine. That's conduitforcommerce.org.
Hollywood and entertainment in general, and said that it's kind of ironic that they're so outraged that the rest of the country isn't outraged at, when the president tweets that or when the president says that. And he says the reason is because Hollywood has done everything they can to push the envelope further, to contribute to a moral decline. And, this guy was just kind of remarking how ironic it is that they're now outraged, that we're not outraged,
See, as a debater, everything like that happens for a reason. It's not like that's a small entity. It's a huge part of society that's controlled. And so why is that? Were they trying to deconstruct discipline created by, prior generations and deconstruct the family and now reconstruct a collectivist idea or a Marxist idea on a society because that wouldn't work in the beginning? And so the contradiction with feminism, that's a heck of a contradiction. These guys are marching with Islamists and saying they advocate for, protection of women. And so that's a contradiction. You have to look back and go, all right, so let's analyze. What's going on here? So are they really who they say they are? Is this really about feminism, or is this a mask? Because ultimately, tests of reason and logic are about removing masks, peeling back the onions, hiding what's underneath. And so what is underneath that? If they were truly liberal, they would do what they do with us and say, well, you have to reject the fantasy of religion, and so stick with logic and science. But in this case, they're aligning themselves with other religions that are much more radical. And so who are these people? Are they trying to really enforce science, logic, and reason, or are they aligning themselves with, our enemies?
It's a very good point. A very good question that you're raising. Again, we're talking.
Yeah, what's going on there? I'm not saying that's what's going on there, but that's not like a mistake. They didn't slip on some ice and fall into Islam.
Yeah.
These are purposeful things, So then you got to step back and look at that whole situation and see what's going on with the whole community.
So we're talking again, folks, with Don Dancer. He lives in Northwest Arkansas. He's a professional debate coach. He's been on the debate circuit. I read here, for 30 years debating on the college and pro debate circuit. I gotta imagine, doing this at the collegiate level, Don, that you've had some run-ins with, history teachers. You seem to be a knowledgeable person of history. What are our kids being taught, and does that have something to do with the fact that we have more and more people that appear to not be able to think critically?
There's a lot going on. I wouldn't lay it on the doorstep of history teachers. I've analyzed what's going on there. And by the way, I want to say, I talked about the left, but there's contradictions on the right too. I mean, and so I don't want to get into this idea that I'm pushing one side or the other. But let me get back to the teaching thing there. It seems to be there's several really large issues that's going on with the classroom and maybe history, but one is a lot of it's
Welcome back to the show, ladies and gentlemen. We're headed into our final segment here on the Paul Harrell Show with Conduit News. This is Hannah Howard filling in for him while he's on vacation. And so we have on the line with us Mr. Hicks Smith from Smith's Ready Mix. Welcome to the show, Mr. Smith.
Good morning, Hannah. It's always good to be on the show talking about conservative values and principles, and so I'm glad to be here. What can I do for you?
Absolutely. Well, that's at the heart of Conduit. So you own Smith's Ready Mix, and so tell us a little bit about your company and how you got started, all those years ago, and what made you successful when you started.
Well, the company actually began shortly after World War II when my father got home from the war, actually in 1947. He began business with a bulldozer after having worked for the county to get acquainted with heavy equipment. He went into business serving the farmers of Howard County in the local area with their construction needs for soil and water conservation. He soon joined with his partner, John Howell, a well-known politician at the time who had served as county judge, sheriff, and also in the legislature. And they began a partnership with a bulldozer and started doing dirt work throughout the county. So it began fairly small. And then in 1961, they added a concrete plant to the mix in Nashville. And I had been working with them all through the summers. And on Saturdays, my dad was always good to have a job for me when I got out of school. So I had some experience working with that. And when the concrete business started in 1961, I seemed to kind of move toward that line of work. And so that was a big news and a big help for me because I was more interested in the concrete business, it seemed like, than the other part. But so we've been in business for 72 years here in Southwest Arkansas.
Absolutely. So when you came into the company, when you came into this equation, what kind of obstacles did you personally face that maybe you weren't ready for, or that you had to learn along the way, those valuable lessons?
Well, I came right out of college. I went to University of Arkansas and graduated in 1967 with a degree in agricultural engineering. And even though I had worked in the company, was pretty well familiar with the ongoing activities, it was a big change to go right into management. I remember our first job here in Nashville was building the Tyson's processing plant, which was a huge endeavor. And it took a lot of hard work and long hours to produce that job. I know there's a lot of days feeling lonely, even though you have help. You're not always, you don't always have somebody to help with the management part of the company to give you advice as far as what to do next. You have to pretty well wing it on your own. But the education I had to that point, through working for my dad and going to college, it was enough to give me the confidence and the ability to get through some of those trying times. But some of the obstacles we had was building work, big work like we'd never built before. Getting them employees is always a problem, hiring and keeping good employees. But many of the things that I had to start with were just a learning curve. You have to get used to being the boss, and you have to get used to understanding that all employees are looking to you for guidance and for the answers. And if you don't have the answers, you got to have access to resources that will give you those answers. And so you usually spend nighttime hours and after hours researching what you need to do to answer those questions the next day, because they come fast and furious. So I would say that it was somewhat of a shock to be put into a position where you are the authority. You're the one that's supposed to know, and they expect you to know. So if you don't have the answer, you need to find it pretty quick.
Well, absolutely. So you mentioned workforce, keeping good employees, hiring good employees. What was your experience just with the workforce availability anyways? Because, small business, of course, drives Arkansas's economy, but you got to have the workers to work.
Well, a good workforce is vital to the success of a company, and to be able to keep them is absolutely necessary. It's hard to do with so many other opportunities in the marketplace. I know we require CDL licensed drivers. That means the driver must be drug free. He must be trained to drive a truck, and he needs to have some age on him. We can't. Company can't grow. It can't even maintain its current operations if it doesn't have good, dedicated helpers or workers to help. I was fortunate early on to get some good, dedicated people that stayed with me throughout the years, and they've definitely been a source of my ability to expand and grow. Their ability to move with me was vital. And so I was fortunate in that I had some core employees that stayed with me, and that was vital to our success. Absolutely.
Well, I think that's probably a testament to, I'm sure you were a great employer. Good employees are going to stick around for a good employer. So I think that's important. So you mentioned, it's hard to keep workers just because there's so many more opportunities out there. And, a lot of times it seems like the government wants to create those opportunities for people. So as a small business owner, how did the government help you, hurt you, hinder you? Could they have rolled back on regulations?
The best thing government can do for small business is to get out of the way, which allows the free enterprise market system to work. If that is working, the economy is moving in a positive direction, which creates jobs. It creates jobs because small employers and large employers are willing to reinvest in their company and in the marketplace to grow. And so that's the key to improvement and success is change. Our economy is built on change. And if we didn't have change, my business wouldn't have never been successful. It's important for business to complement, or for government to complement business and not regulate it to death and impose high taxes on it to keep it from growing. If you can just allow small business and large business to do their own operations without interference, they will definitely keep good jobs and provide more employment opportunities for our country. I know the economy we have right now is exactly what small business and big business needs. We are seeing a relaxation of regulations and rules. We're seeing a lowering of the taxes. We're seeing improvements that encourages all of us to spend money and to buy more equipment, to buy more services, so we can serve our customers better and we can serve more customers. That's the key to being successful. Customers and more of them, good customers. And so the economy that we have right now, the best thing the government can do for business is to get out of the way and allow the economy to grow, and that will satisfy by and large all the needs of business. Now, when the economy is held back like it was in the Obama years and earlier than that, the Jimmy Carter years, the key then was just to hold on. There's no thought about growing. Nobody was reinvesting in the economy when Obama was in office, and nobody was when Jimmy Carter was in office, when interest rates were 20%. You couldn't afford to. And so the key to success for business is for the government to get out of the way.
Well, absolutely. So now that the government has kind of relaxed a little bit and, business is booming, what's the future of your company? You said your dad passed it down to you. What happens after you?
Well, fortunately, I had some children that grew up in the business. I have 2 kids that are active in the business every day. They've been running the business now since 2015. I had a heart surgery in that time, and they took over the business, all of my responsibilities then, and they've kept those responsibilities. So I've been semi-retired since 2015. So my 2 children I have given them stock in the company, and when I'm past usefulness, we'll get the rest of the stock in their hands. So it'll be theirs when I pass. And so I'm blessed. That's the key to my succession are my 2 children with their dedication, their determination, and their purpose. I'm so blessed because of them. I've told them multiple times how that I would have done much better in business if there had been another person, if it 2 of me along the way, because of what it takes. Well, there's 2 of me out there now, so they're doing a great job, and the company is in good hands, and so I have no problems with succession in that regard.
Absolutely. Well, I know you sure are proud, and I'm sure that, makes your heart smile that it's continuing on in your family. So I have this inkling feeling that you can't sit still in your retirement. And so you have taken up a presence in your county Republican committee. So tell us about that.
Well, back during the Obama years, we were trying to figure out something to do politically. I've never been involved in politics in my history, but I was compelled then to try to do something. And what we decided, several others, we all together decided to form a Republican party here in Howard County and start meeting on a regular basis, if nothing more, to just try to keep up with what's happening in our economy and trying to be informed about how to vote. We have an awesome responsibility in this country. This democracy or this way of government is in our hands, whether we know it or not. It seems like there's not much we can do, but through the local Republican Party, we've been able to get a lot of people excited about what they actually can do. And so we're working to improve our standard of living here through the Republican Party, and we're hoping to be able to affect good and change as we go along. These socialistic ideas are anathema to people like me, conservative people that's grown up in fear of socialism and communism. I grew up with communism, and having to be prepared at all times to find a place to hide. And so I love the world situation now with us being a leader and being able to exert our freedom-loving ideas throughout the world. So, in a small way, I've contributed and been a part of revitalization here in Howard County of the conservative spirit and freedom-loving ideals. And so we're real. We're growing every month. We've been blessed to have some good speakers and a good attendance at our meetings, and we've got a very vibrant group here in Nashville. I'm very proud of it.
Absolutely. Well, I tell you, it's nice that people on your end are looking out for the people on my end. You know, your generation has really stepped up to try to protect my generation from ourselves because, you know, you said you used to fear communism. Well, I feared socialism, but yet I live in a world where my generation wants to embrace it. So I think it's very important that, you know, your generation steps in and educates us on the matter. Mr. Smith, it has been an honor to have you on the show, and I thank you for coming on with me while I'm guest hosting. And we'll see you next time.
We've enjoyed it very much. Thank you for coming into my home this morning, and I wish you the best. And you're a wonderful host, and so it's been a pleasure. Have a good day.
I sure appreciate that. We'll be right back after this break.
I wanted to remind you that if you miss the daily live broadcast, you can always catch up and listen across our digital platforms on your smartphone or computer. First, you can watch the show on Facebook. Just use your internet browser and type in facebook.com/Conduit News. From there, select videos on the left side of your screen. From there, you can watch the full 2-hour show each day or select specific interviews you want to watch. Another place you can watch the show is on YouTube. Just use your internet browser and type in youtube.com. Then, in the search bar, search for Conduit News. Select the Conduit News page as it appears. While here, be sure to hit the subscribe button and click the little bell to receive notifications when new videos are ready. From YouTube, you can also watch every live show daily and all the interviews I have with guests. More options are available at our website, conduitnews.com. Select Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell tab. From here, you can watch each day's show live or watch old episodes and interviews. You can also catch audio-only versions of the show right here on this page of the website. For audio-only versions of the show, you have some options. For Apple iPhone users, simply use the podcast app and search Conduit News. Subscribe to the podcast and get each hour of the show automatically in your app daily. You can also download the SoundCloud app from your app store and search Conduit News to find our station. Conduit News is the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. And now you know. You've got many options to watch what we do, listen to what we do, and find out what government is doing in your name. Learn more at conduitnews.com.
Driven. And so you see a lot of mistakes being made, I would argue, logically. And so I'll give you a couple of examples here. So my own daughter comes home, and she basically is talking to me about our getting involved in World War II, and then she basically comes out and says that it had been explained to her that Japan attacked us for a reason, and we were actually the cause of that. So we had an oil embargo, and we were, influencing a hegemonic power on Japan. However, she didn't know the reason for that. And the reason for that was they had invaded China and, had a lot of atrocities there. She didn't know that we had Americans signing up to fight there for the defense of China, right? And so the positive for the United States was left out, And then one of my favorite stories about this, I was judging a speech competition, and this young man who was actually, you could tell he was a brilliant kid, he gets up and gives a speech about why the United States should reject our current form of government and adopt the form of government of the Khmer Rouge and the People's Republic of Cambodia.
Huh.
And so, this is a 15, 16, 17-year-old student, high school student, and I'm 53, so my chin's on the floor. And so, are you there?
I'm here, yes.
Okay. And so,
hang on, we lost you just for a second, so I think that's why you were. That's what you're
someone's
thinking.
calling me on my.
Oh, okay. Go ahead. So your chin's on the floor. Don, are you there? Can you hear me, sir?
I'm there. I'm waiting for that to end. Anyway, and so after the speech, the student sits down, and typically I don't get involved. I just critique the speech, but this was such a horrific situation. And so I asked the young man where he got his information, and he said, well, my AP government class. And I said, well, to the students there, I go, get your phones out, and I want you to Google Khmer Rouge and Cambodia. And then I said, I want you to hit images. And so they do that, and their faces sort of, go into shock. And the kid looks at me, and he goes, what is that? And I go, that's the Khmer Rouge. And so for me, there's a lot of ideology impacting what's being taught.
Seems like you're describing a manipulation. It seems like our young people are being manipulated. And let me ask you this, like devil's advocate, was that ever not the case? Or,
yeah.
What do you think?
That's the whole point of the cave, right? Even in the classroom, you're in the cave. And so I don't know if that's ever the case, but that's a heck of a a heck of a omission, right? To not even mention the killing fields and to talk about the Khmer Rouge.
Right. Their Cambodia's government's fantastic, except when it's not, and this happens.
Yeah. And I think that's also it leads to another issue with how things are taught and even discussed in our society. It's sort of this myopic view. And what I mean by that is that things are seen through the scope and prism of, well, it's a United States issue. But most of these issues, like slavery, are not only were not American issues, but they were global issues. And not only did they exist during colonialism, but they go all the way back to Mesopotamia. And so it's a vastly human issue. It's not an American issue.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, for our last few minutes together for the day. It's been a great honor to fill in for Paul Harrell today on Conduit News. So I have a proposition for you Facebook watchers. So Ruth Bader Ginsburg, of course, the Supreme Court Justice, the notorious RBG, is coming to Little Rock. And of course, the law school has given us all free tickets on the floor. Now, mind you, this is an event hosted by the Clinton Foundation. So, do you think I should go? So, of course, I'm torn with, oh my goodness, lightning's going to strike me if I go. But, I don't necessarily see it that way. I think, at the end of the day, she's still a Supreme Court justice, and that's an incredibly respectful thing, even if I don't always agree with her. And that, maybe she's lecturing. So, maybe it'll be worthwhile to go listen to her and hear what she has to say. So I want you guys to sound off on Facebook for me and give me your input on if I should go to the lecture on Tuesday or if maybe I should just stay at home. So I'm going to read all of your comments and see your input on that. But come back with me Tuesday. We're going to have Senator John Bozeman on the show with us. So that's going to be real exciting. And then we're also going to have one of my professors who's done some really interesting research into college admissions. His name is Robert Steinbach. He's going to be on the show with me, and it's going to be another fun-packed day. So it's been great to be with you guys. I will see you Tuesday.